Well, welcome everybody. And again, today you're back here with Ed Jones, and I've got a most amazing interview, and certainly the one from the furthest distance from my town. This gentleman is in New Zealand, and he's getting up very, very early this morning to have a amazing conversation about a book that he has written called Harnessing the Nine Hallmarks of Aging. Greg Macpherson is a pharmacist, author of this book, and we've talked one other time before, and this gentleman is on the cusp of allowing the public to learn about some of these options that we have against the most devastating disease on earth, which is father time and aging. You know, we walk around always concerned about, the virus or car wrecks and germs and cancer and heart disease. Well, they're all got a place to be dealt with. But really and truly, the biggest risk we have, certainly past a certain age, will be father time. That is what will take us out. We can be guaranteed of that. No guarantees on all the other ones. So, Greg Macpherson, welcome to my show today. And this is going to be very interesting because I read your book. I downloaded it on my phone the very, very day that I was told that we were going to chat, and was ultimately impressed. I have spent my 42-year professional career studying the effects of food and nutrients on the human system, longevity, disease, optimization, all the things that I know that food and nutrients have within their own power structure to help us. Sadly, traditional medicine, traditional colleges are not teaching this. People in the field of healthcare have to reach out and go out in order to learn this, and it's not real common yet. But like you said in your book, COVID has changed a lot of the perceptions as far as everything from nursing homes to healthcare, and the fact that we have to take personal responsibility for our future because nobody else is probably doing it. So again, welcome, Greg, and I want to get into this about your book, Harnessing the Nine Hallmarks of Aging.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation with you.
How did you get started with this? What's been your passion that led you into this?
I think it just a passion for learning. I'm a pharmacist, as you mentioned, and I've always been involved in health, but I also love looking at technology. And the last 10 years, I've spent just going down that massive rabbit hole called biotechnology and looking to understand these molecules that actually can change the aging process, because we're starting to learn that's actually possible now, and that's possibly, well, it hasn't been available to us in the past.
I know I'm getting way ahead of the game. I've studied with people from Dirk Pearson early on at Life Extension, all these people, Dr. Perlmutter, all these people I truly respect as far as defining what is it about the birthdays that come into us? What is it actually doing to the cellular structure? Because, way early on, we kind of thought it was just free radicals, and that was causing all the damage, and that's why we weren't living longer and all that. Well, we know that's really not the case. It plays a small role but not a huge role. How many different pieces to this puzzle do you think there really is?
Yeah, there's anything from 9 and maybe 10 or even 11, but right now there are 9 hallmarks of aging. And the hallmarks are areas of our cells that decline as we age. And they've been identified because when scientists are working with them, if they make them a little worse, it makes us age a wee bit faster. And if you make them better, then it turns out you age slower. And so it's not that it's just about the free radicals, or it's about your telomeres shrinking, or it's other bits and pieces. It's actually the whole picture. We talk about holistic medicine and holistic nutrition. It's time for us to focus in on the holistic cell, if you will. And a really good example is taking your car in to get it serviced. If you just had your engine done, you'd be pretty happy, and you get out the car and you go down the road, but maybe the brakes aren't working so well, or the wipers aren't working. And you'd be pretty unhappy with your mechanic if that's what he delivered you. So when your car goes in, it's got a 60-point check. They look at everything to work out what needs to be maintained. And that's actually what we need to be doing with our cells right now. And that's, I think, where the breakthrough of these hallmarks are. It gives us targets to go after and to intervene with the view that we can actually start to slow that aging process down.
I love that. I love heroes like yourself who've journeyed into this jungle of nonsense, also non-information, and then come out with a game plan. Because hope alone is not going to slow father aging. It might make us have a better mood. And the thing is that always has aggravated me, even early on in my life, was all the stories of people who go to their doctor, they're 50 plus, and they say, Doc, I'm just not as fast or strong as I used to be, and I'm not feeling as well. Well, you know what? It's just because you're getting older. Well, you know what? BS on that. Yes, there's a point where we all will decline, but I really see and feel that we're declining at a far faster rate than we should. We now have the information that we can focus on different components. And I do believe heavily in the right blood testing, not the kind that you normally get, and I believe in introducing diets that are more low inflammatory, and taking supplements like we're going to talk about NAD and a few of the other options that we do have. And I don't think it's ever too late to start this. I mean, I'm almost 64. I certainly led this life since I was 14, but I will say what most people say. If I wish I had known, back then what I know now, but we didn't know it. You didn't know it. No scientist knew it. It was all conjecture, all guesswork, and there was no PubMeds, and nobody was really focusing and studying. So now we got a book, your book. And so maybe hit some of the high points of what are some of the pillars of this aging thing that we need to address, and what simple steps can we take to slow down father time.
Yeah, good. And I think it's just so valid what you're saying, because you did used to go to the doctor and he'd say, look, it is just time. You're just getting old. And I think that comes from a place that we just didn't understand aging at a cellular level like we do now. And many people still don't. And so we just accept it. And the great news is we don't have to accept it. Things are available to us now that can significantly help modify our aging trajectory. And really it's about aging well, because you don't want to be curled up in a ball in a rest home somewhere for 25 years, and that's not life extension. That's misery extension, right?
Yeah.
What we want to do is actually increase the amount of healthy time that we've got on this planet, and so that's the exciting part, and that's really where we're headed, which is great news for everybody, and it's so accessible, which is what's so exciting. So the 9 hallmarks of aging, as I mentioned, these 9 areas of our cells, but I like to break them down into 3 areas, and one is our DNA, and most people know what your DNA is. It's like your little instruction set that you've got in the middle of every cell in your body, and that instruction set defines who we are and what we do, and it tells us how tall we're going to be, those sorts of things. But it turns out that our DNA, its function declines a touch as we age. And so what we really want to do with our DNA is to protect it as much as we can. And our DNA breaks 50 to 100,000 times a day per cell. And it's phenomenal. This comes from the UV that we're exposed to, the pollution in our environment, the food that we eat, but also the oxidative stress that's coming from within us, because we breathe oxygen to live. We burn oxygen and combine it with food to make energy in our cells, and those cells have a little bit of exhaust called free radicals that create oxidative stress. And so these are the things that insult and damage our DNA. So a strategy around that is, obviously, we exercise and we diet. These are things that we know are good for our health. But if we can take certain molecules that can protect and support all that repair and maintenance machinery that's naturally happening inside our cells, if we can reduce oxidative stress a wee bit and keep those telomeres for as long as possible, and also provide the substrate for what we normally use to turn on our genes. So, right now, if we go for a walk and exercise, you turn on positive genes, you reduce inflammation, those sorts of things. But you need some of the right chemical messengers inside your cell to enable your DNA to make and turn on those genes correctly. So these are the things that you can focus on specifically around your DNA, and that's a strategy that you should be doing. It's lifelong, and certainly from your 30s, because when we're young, all these mechanisms are working so well. But as we get older, then they decline. So from your 30s, do that. And I can talk about a few molecules now if you like, or we can move to the next one. What would you like, Ed?
Yeah, I love the term chemical messengers, and the DNA and the genes are like a blueprint, and they're directing so much of our momentary second to second decisions within our body. If all the genes were turned on at one moment, we would be dead. If they were all turned off at one moment, they'd be dead. There's an intricate balance between this symphony of genetic expressions, and that's there to help maintain this moment, but it's also there to, if we do it correctly, to slow the damages of time so that we can be further harmonious with our aging and actually do graceful aging. Yes, I know I take a lot of compounds that hopefully will address this exact issue. Again, our issue is to minimize damage to the DNA blueprint structure of genetics and optimize it to its very best ability. And when you're young, I mean, you tell me, but I think when we're young, we have a very optimal system that seems to have the right buttons pushed, and everything's like the new computer, the new iPhone that I just got is so well done. And with the more apps and more age on them, then they start to get slower and more sluggish. I think that's probably a pretty good analogy. So as far as certain compounds that actually can protect this system of the body, what are your most favored?
My absolute favorite for protecting DNA and much of the cellular componentry is something called hobamine, which is a new ingredient that's come out of something called Himalayan tartary buckwheat. And it's relatively new to science. And when I say new to science, we're talking 10, 15 years. But this has been really, really well researched and studied. And this tackles and protects our cellular components, our DNA, from oxidative stress in a completely different way. So regular antioxidants come in and they quench those free radicals that we're trying to do and reduce oxidative stress, which is a good thing. But we actually need a little bit of oxidative stress sitting in the background there because the body uses it, our cells use it to communicate inside the cell and between cells, and also for our immune system. And so you don't want to be taking so many antioxidants that you actually mute that process, that healthy free radical oxidative stress signaling. So hobamine tackles this in a brand new way, in that it actually is not an antioxidant, but it actually protects the cellular membranes and the DNA from the effects of oxidative stress without actually interfering with that healthy free radicals. So that's a real breakthrough. We have never had that before, and that's just going to allow us to improve the health of our cells significantly. And it's something that we can take as a regular supplement for from our 30s and on. And it's just, and I know this is not quite the right term for it, but it's almost like sunscreen for our cells, right? It actually just helps the components of our cells. And so that's, if there's one ingredient that I'm super excited about, that's it.
And it comes from buckwheat, correct?
Yeah, a special type of buckwheat, Himalayan tartary buckwheat. So it's not in everyone, and you've got to eat your way through a whole bunch to get it. So it's actually, the fact is that researchers have isolated the hobamine out of this plant, and that means that we can take it in meaningful levels.
That is the one supplement that I have not experimented with, and I certainly will be doing that. Does NAD fall under this category of what we're talking about at this moment?
Yeah, 100% it does. So NAD is a key enzyme that is in our body, and it's involved in energy production, but it's also deeply involved in repair mechanisms in our cells as well. And so there are these things called sirtuins, which you'll be familiar with. They're genes that are and proteins that spend a lot of time helping our cells repair and maintain themselves, essentially. And they're NAD dependent. So you need NAD to connect with these sirtuins to actually make them optimize them, if you will. So, as Father Time comes along and robs us of that NAD, then these sirtuins are robbed of their substrate and it robbed of the ability to effectively repair and maintain things as well as they used to. So we have 7 sirtuins in our cells. 3 hang out in the nucleus where our DNA is, and their function is to keep that DNA looking shiny and new. We've got 3 in our mitochondria, which are involved in the energy generation process that we can talk about in a bit, and then 1 just in the middle of our cell that has a numerous effects, but super important. And we probably all know the sirtuin activators. These are resveratrol, pterostilbene, compounds that come from fruit and grapes, and they, again, very important part of that healthy stack of supplements that we can take to support our DNA.
Yeah, I like that. And, we can get, people like me can get too far out there with trying too many things. And getting older, I want to really focus on the most vital and most important ones, because you can only take so many pills, you can only do so many things, and certainly budgets are limited at times. But I'm rating NAD as one of my most important supplements for protection. And the sirtuins really, are, when they looked at animal studies of extending lifespan, we know that calorie deprivation was one of the most powerful methods. And that's why I continue to talk very, very regularly about intermittent fasting and fasting, because those seem to affect those genes in a very positive manner. But like you said, resveratrol, a quality brand, will also do that. So we can almost get some calorie deprivation longevity benefits without having to not go through fasting. Yet, I'm a huge fan of intermittent fasting, of eating 10 hours a day and not eating for 14. I do that about 4 to 5 days a week. Are you a fan of intermittent fasting?
Yeah, huge fan, and it's, as I've come to learn, it's really important for us. We the Western diet, just our Western lifestyles right now, have us fed all the time, and it's a problem for our bodies. We're modern people, modern humans in ancient bodies. And our ancient bodies were used to eating a bunch when there was lots of food, and then there'll be times when we couldn't eat. And so the body actually is really healthy for it to have periods where it eats and periods when it doesn't. And so I do 2 days a week where I don't eat for 24 hours. And so, and the purpose of that is to inhibit this thing called mTOR, which is this switch that we've got in our cells. And mTOR is a protein. When you eat, it turns on. It's what its purpose is to actually help us sense what we've got in our body, and then tells us, hey, look, it's a protein that you've just eaten, so let's put that towards some muscle or some sugar, and we'll put it this way, and so on. So when you turn it on, it triggers a whole bunch of cascades, which builds in your body, builds things, builds muscle, builds tissue. When you fast, you actually turn it off, and what happens there is you trigger cascades which create housekeeping processes. So what happens is your body clears out some cells, it might break down some proteins that are not working so well. So you're giving yourself the opportunity to do some housekeeping, and that's really healthy, because when you go and eat again, the body refreshes all the stuff that it cleaned out, and then you get new shiny cells and shiny proteins, and that's super good for our health. And I think part of the reason we have some of these conditions of older age is because we have spent too much time in the fed space and not enough time in the hungry space doing that housekeeping. And it does compound over time to have a bit of a negative effect. So if we can fast a little bit, it's really good for ourselves. And like you say, it has really significant health benefits.
I love that. That's a very good analogy. I use the kind of the example of Disney here in this country. And I sometimes refer to the fact that most of us have been to Disney. It's like the most pristine park there is. Everything is cleaner than you can ever imagine. There's not a piece of paper on the ground. I don't care, almost wherever you look. I don't know how they do it. But I always use the analogy of people who eat unhealthy. It would be like, or don't take enough of the right nutrients, or don't fast, or don't clean your body out of senile cells, because we do have a lot of cells that they're not fully dysfunctional, but they're not functional, and they're almost like an old person, but they're in a cellular form. And so with Disney, just imagine if at night is when they do all their cleaning. Just imagine what the difference of that park if only once a week they did the cleaning. You could never have the pristine park. You would never have it looking with the appearance and the cleanliness that you have. It has to be done regularly, and it has to be supplied with the right people, the right time, and the right this and the right that. That's the same with this whole thing with nutrients and food and fasting and exercise. It has to be done regularly in order to really get the best end result. So on these senile cells, I know that you've written some about that. Tell us about these senile. What do we do about cells that are half functional?
Yeah, these zombie cells, these senescent cells. So these are cells that actually serve us really well when we're young, and they because they it's a mechanism where our cells actually just stop replicating, and that's important for us at times. And this can happen because we want to The signal happens that cell might be cancerous, and so the body actually shuts it down and stops it in its tracks. Or it could be that cell is a part of your immune system that's making a scar because it's repairing an injury or so on, and you don't want that cell to keep operating. You need it to stop so that scar heals properly, and so on. So these cells, this senescent state is really useful for us, but for whatever reason, as we get older, these cells hang around and they don't get cleared out, and they are like the neighbors you don't want, right? These guys are smelly, slightly toxic, a bit loud, whatever. They affect all the neighboring cells around them, and what they're trying to do, they're actually saying, hey, I'm going to chuck some inflammatory junk out there because I want my immune system to come and clear me out. I want to leave the body, and the body just for whatever reason gets a little deaf to it, and they don't go. The immune system doesn't clear them out. So we end up with these cells, and there's a senescent burden, if you will, that we get as we age. And so what researchers have found is that if you clear these senescent cells out, that you can actually really decrease the inflammatory burden on the body. And in mouse models, they've shown that they've improved an extended lifespan by 30% by just clearing these cells out. So these clinical trials happening as we speak. The Mayo Clinic's doing them, looking at what therapies we can use to reduce the senescent burden in our body, and we think that could have a very similar effect to what's happening in the mouse. Now, it might not be 30%, but it could be 10%, which is material for all of us. But the good news is we can do this naturally, again, by that fasting and by exercise, these things that we know are good for us. But there are a few supplements as well that we can take, and things like something called fisetin or fisetin, which is present in vegetables. Strawberries is probably the most abundant amount of it. This research is showing that if you, take that supplement, that the body can identify those senescent cells easier, and guess what? It gets rid of them and it drops them down, and it's particularly good for you.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I know that that supplement has just recently come on board in this country enough to be common to be found. And I did start taking that about a month or two ago. It makes such good common sense because, again, your book, the Harnessing the 9 Hallmarks of Aging, there's 9 and probably 9 plus different components to this puzzle. So there's no one single thing. It'll be like maybe I'm going to take my car in, but I'm only going to get the tires checked. I don't want anything else checked, but I'm going to get that because it's going to make it last forever. No, it won't. We have other things that break down. And so as far as, and again, on the strawberry thing, I'm hugely invested in the power of food. The issue is, at least in this country, it's not super difficult, but it's also not really user friendly to always get organic foods. And strawberries in the what we call the dirty dozen in this country. It's one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides, fungicides that there is. And so, those people who are kind of like, oh, just get everything from food. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work for me because I can buy this fisetin in a capsule form and no, I don't have chemicals, pesticides, glyphosate, and other things. Yet I still focus on the foods itself and other ones. But for my medicinal purposes, I'm going to rely on a reliable company's supplement so that I can get the same dose every day and it be predictable. If those strawberries are picked way before they're ripe and they're grown wrong and all that, you don't know how much of anything is in that. So it's an unpredictable world in this country with our foods. And I don't know about New Zealand, but it certainly is here. So what are a couple of the other hallmarks of aging that you write about in your book?
Yeah, so one of the other ones is mitochondrial dysfunction, and mitochondria are our cellular batteries. They're so important for us. They're fascinating little parts of our cells, and they do so much more than produce energy, but that's their main function. They take the food we eat and the air we breathe, combine it and create energy for our food. And just like the iPhone you were talking about earlier, we've all experienced, you get your nice shiny iPhone and the battery life is maybe 2 days and it exceeds all expectations. And then sort of slowly over maybe 2 or 3 years, you don't really notice it, but it starts getting a little sluggish and it doesn't last as long. And then it gets to the point where it gets annoying and you've got to replace it. So our mitochondria, we can't replace them, so we've got to look after them. And they are actually designed to last a lifetime. So they're amazing little parts of our cells, but they do decline with age. In fact, they decline around 10% a decade from our 30s. We don't feel it immediately, but in our 40s and 50s, we start to feel a little tired like that iPhone. We don't repair, we don't bounce back from illnesses quite so quickly. And it's like that car we were talking about. It's a beautiful V8, and at 40, we've got 7.5 cylinders going, and at 60, we've got 6, and at 80, we've got just maybe 4 going. And so what we've got to do is work out strategies to care and nurture those mitochondria over our lifetime so that they can deliver for us. And why it's important, why you need energy for your cells, it's not just about not feeling tired. Our cells need energy to operate. They need energy to do stuff. Your heart needs to beat just constantly. Those are mitochondria that are fueling that. And there are different levels of mitochondria in each cell type, but in our heart, almost half of that cell is full of mitochondria because of the energy it needs. And so these mitochondria, when they decline, what happens is that that cell doesn't have as much energy as it used to. And at some point, it's got to go, okay, what am I going to do here? Am I going to do the beating, or am I going to do the repair and maintenance? Take the rubbish out, take the junk out, fix up these things. And it's got to make a decision. And maybe it says, well, actually, more beating is more important right now, so I'm going to let the junk build up. And this is the aging process that ultimately interferes with how well that cell is going to work. And so healthy mitochondria are your friend. And this is why strategies are important. And again, I'm going to keep coming back to that good diet because that's important. Don't overload yourself with sugar because it puts them under massive stress. And so that's part of the reason that sugar is so dangerous to us. We need a little, but just not too much. And we also want to take care of your mitochondria by exercising. When you exercise, the body responds by building more mitochondria, which just takes the load off everybody. And so everybody can just get on and not be overworked. And then supplements like astaxanthin, which is a really interesting antioxidant, which goes and sits in the membranes of our cells and our mitochondria and just deals with the oxidative stress that these little parts of our cells are going through. And then NAD, which is part of the picture as well. Again, it just helps those mitochondria get the energy they want. And it could be that NAD decreasing with age actually is the reason that our mitochondria decline in function as we age. So a strategy of kind of looking after the engine, if you will, as well as putting a bit of fuel in there to keep them going is a really good strategy.
Yeah, I love that. I started doing astaxanthin about 15 to 20 years ago. And I remember I've always been a guy who's been a self-appointed guinea pig. So I do like doing physical challenges, not to beat other people, but to beat myself. And I saw this guy on TV, national TV, that was a Marine, and he was on Good Morning America. He was setting a record for doing chin-ups. He did 230 chin-ups in 1 hour. Well, I thought, you know what? I want to see what I can do. So I started working out hard on chin-ups. It took me about a year to do this, but I took astaxanthin in very high doses, and it really helped me look like I had a good tan. It seemed to protect me from UV rays better than any suntan lotion. But the side effect of it for me was strength. And I actually sent an email to the company, and this was about 17 years ago. And I said, is this common that people who take high levels of astaxanthin do get much stronger? And they said preliminary research may show that it does. Well, I ended up setting a record with 285 chin-ups in 1 hour. And I don't think I could have done it without astaxanthin. I'm just hugely invested into that nutrient. And again, it does so many other things. And, to me, the best book I've ever read about mitochondrial function, and I'm thinking while I'm talking, is Tripping Over the Truth. And it was written about why we get cancer. And it really all comes down to the mitochondrial cell. And this guy explains it to a level I've hardly ever read in a book that was so exciting that I couldn't put the book down. That's how great it was. So Tripping Over the Truth for those who want to get that kind of book. But again, yours, Harnessing the 9 Hallmarks of Aging. Is there another hallmark? What other hallmark should we look at? Because right now we've talked about, the diet, the exercise, the fasting, the resveratrol, the NAD, the buckwheat, good nutrients all the way around. And the fact, and I want to bring this back up, I'm sorry to go backwards a little, we all thought that tons of antioxidants were the answer, but we really found in animal studies that too many of antioxidants actually lessened the lifespan. I don't know if that's going to affect me or not, because I was a mega doser for many years, and now I'm more of the across the board with far more things but far less dosing. But what are some of the other hallmarks that you could talk about?
Yeah, so stem cell fatigue is another hallmark,
Oh,
and we all know about stem cells in the context of new stem cell therapies and treatments and so on. And stem cells are cells that we have in our body. We've got banks of them everywhere, like in our bones, for example, is where our blood cells are born, if you will. And a stem cell is a special type of cell that can kind of go in a couple of directions. It can go, right, I want to be this cell, or this cell, so to speak. And so we've got neural stem cells in I guess our brain and spinal column. And really the brain will just say, look, hey, look, I need this particular cell, and it'll fire up a bunch of mechanisms, and next minute the stem cell will turn up, and it'll literally turn into the type of cell that the brain needs. And these stem cells, as we get older, get fatigued, they get tired, and their populations collapse, if you will. And that's not good, right? So what we want to do is over our lifetime is actually look after those stem cells. And again, it's very much the same supplements we were just talking about before, like your NADs and your resveratrols, pterostilbene, which is a form of resveratrol, but it's more bioactive and more bioavailable. It just seems to get absorbed more and hang around in the body just a little bit longer. And that's quite an exciting compound, but very similar to resveratrol. So these things, NAD, again, astaxanthin, dopamine, they're all going to help those populations just hang out and be a little healthier. And then, of course, the big thing that we have as we get older is this inflammaging. This is just basically a level of inflammation that just kind of sets in and just ticks away and irritates everything, and just ages things faster. So what we want to do is where we can is just, again, reduce that inflammation as much as possible. And when we do that, then this again is just helping our stem cells. And we have this thing called immunosenescence, which is sort of relating to that senescent cells that we were talking about earlier, but it affects our immune system, and it slows down our ability to fight off of bugs and viruses, etc. So we know our immune system declines as we age, and that manifests because we see more cancer and so on. And really, we actually all have cancer at any one time.
mm-hmm.
It's actually our immune system which keeps it in check and just make sure that it doesn't get out of control. And so as that immune system declines as we age, we just see more chance of getting cancer just because of that immune system not doing quite its job properly. So it turns out we come right back to dopamine that we were talking about before, and that has a really significant effect on our immunosenescence. And a really good example, Ed, is right now with COVID. We're seeing older adults respond particularly poorly to the COVID virus. It's actually, I think if you're 80, your chances of passing away from COVID compared to someone in their 20s is like, I don't know, 10x, 20, 30x. And so what they're finding actually is that if we can actually clear those senescent cells out, we may respond to COVID a whole bunch differently. And so there is research happening right now investigating that, and we'll learn about that over the next few months. I think that potentially a strategy of reducing the senescent burden on our body will actually make us change the outcomes when it comes to the COVID virus.
I think COVID's been such a blessing on so many levels, and certainly a lot of heartache on others. But the thing it has proven to us is, one is, the weaker the individual, the more risk we have of not only COVID, but anything hitting us. But we've never had such a clear message as we've had with COVID for people who are over-medicated, overweight, and elderly. Well, the elderly, it comes down to Father Time again. Why are they so susceptible? Because of all the reasons you talk about in your book, Harnessing the 9 Hallmarks of Aging. If all those things were maintained optimally, there's a point where we're all going to get OLD. There's no doubt. I will. I don't care how many times I work out, how many organic foods I eat, and how many nutrients. But we're getting it so much earlier than we should. And, I always have loved Weston A. Price, the dentist who did all that research on tribes around the world back in the 50s when he was able to do it and take all these photographs. He had like 10,000 photographs. He would always look at the teeth of everybody and these tribes and cultures that basically never had tooth decay. They had almost no cancer, no heart disease, but they were eating from the earth, and they were eating the high fat diets and the unprocessed foods, and it showed the power of the body. And then they showed the teeth of kids who are raised the way that all our kids are, with the smaller jaws and the worse teeth and the mental incapacities. All that came. Well, that didn't just happen. It happened because we did the wrong thing. And I love the fact that, and going back slightly, the inflammation chronically is devastating to us, and also your statement about excess sugar. Well, they go together, there's no doubt. And as long as you have an inflamed human body, it's going to age far quicker and be damaged at a much higher rate. And so again, we go back to everything you're talking about with the diet and the exercise and the foods and the supplements. Now, talking about these special supplements, that doesn't negate the need for your basic plan of multivitamins, omega-3s, vitamin D, and magnesium. I mean, I talk about something I call the core four all the time, which is kind of, you walk into a health food store over here, it's just like 8,000 products. You're overwhelmed. Well, I finally put together something called core four, which is just basically 4 products that I think addresses 80% of the needs of everyone for longevity. But on top of that core four would be the things we're talking about now, which really are not, they're not really nutritional deficiencies, are they? They are there to address slowing the damaging of something rather than it being a deficiency, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had an understanding of what is good for us, what is good for our health, for the like you're talking about, for the longest time around. Just the diet, the exercise, the managing stress. These things are just what we know, and it's all we could. That was our toolbox, right? Obviously, we had magnesium and the core four, and that's good. So these new supplements are things that just haven't been available to us before, and this is what's, I guess, really what's being born out of understanding the 9 hallmarks of aging. And these 9 hallmarks have just unleashed. Just the identification of them has unleashed billions and billions of dollars of research, targeting and understanding, what happens if we turn this dial over here that's involved in slowing mTOR? What happens if we pull this lever here, which makes our mitochondria a wee bit quicker? And looking at it, and it's like, I guess, what we're seeing with Elon Musk, with SpaceX, and with Tesla, this technology that's just going to radically change how we live is happening with researchers around the world. And as they look inside our body and looking inside our cells, and they're starting to understand that there are things like NAD, which is the fuel that our cells need. And if we're able to get those fuel, if that fuel boosted up, then all of a sudden it lifts up the capability of our cells to repair and maintain itself. It boosts up the level of energy that's available. And this is what's so exciting about where our future is heading, because it's going to be very feasible for us, for you and I, to be talking in 20 years and possibly not look too different than what we are today. I possibly wish I'd discovered these things a little earlier before I lost my hair, but I'll take whatever I can get. And so this is where the paradigm changes. You don't have to accept these diseases that feeling tired and old at 50 or 60 or 70. Just like, no, don't have to accept that now. There are strategies, because we are starting to understand the biochemistry of our cells at a level that the mechanic understands the engine in your car and the modern engine inside your car. So it's accessible to everybody, and we can start to take these things and get on with the business of living instead of the business of decaying, if you will.
I love that. I love your attitude and passion about we don't have to accept this. There are some things in life you really do have to accept, but you don't have to fully believe what you're being told by other health professionals, that it's just your age, it's just your birthdays, there's nothing you can do about it. No, we now have a toolbox. And with information like you, with your book, The Harnessing the 9 Hallmarks of Aging, I mean, I do certainly much publicity and talks and education all the way around. But one thing I've said, probably more common than any other, is I separate the world into 2 classes of people: learners and non-learners. People who access your information are in the learning group. That is the only hope we have, because we have to empower ourselves. Now, there are good helpers out there. I've actually accumulated many in my business. I have 17 practitioners, and I only pick those who understand this kind of philosophy. But it's still an emerging science, and it's not that common, and we don't have that many people. So a lot of this is still on our shoulders that we have to embrace, because it's extremely safe, not that terribly expensive. It works. And, one time years ago, I thought of this probably 25 years ago, because people would ask me, how long will it take before I feel a difference? Well, there are a few things you can feel quickly, but I came up with this. I said, how long would it take if I invented a pill that would make you one day younger every day you took it? How long would it be before you felt a difference? Well, that kind of gets in their head like, wow, I wouldn't feel much in 1 month, but in 1 to 2 years, it would be significant, and then it would get better and better. That's kind of the way all this works for me with the foods and all the right dietary habits. And it gives people more of a ability to focus on the long run. In fact, I just did a big podcast 4 hours ago on the fact that April 28th is National Superhero Day. And, in this country, everybody kind of worships the Marvel mystery people, and I love Wolverine. So I talked all about we can be our own superhero. This is how you do it. And much of what I spoke about has to do with exactly what you're talking about in your book. So it's really good timing, because we don't have to give in. We really don't. Is there any last comments you'd like to leave with people about your great book, and how can they get it? And tell me more.
Yeah, so the last comment really is just, everybody puts a little bit of money away every week for their financial retirement, because you want to get there and you want to be able to be comfortable and have a lifestyle that you want. Next, let's put a little bit of time and effort into our health and getting to your retirement as healthy as possible. And that little bit of stuff that you do now, just like compounding interest that delivers you massive benefits at that retirement point, the stuff you do today is going to compound and mean that you turn up fit and able and ready to enjoy that retirement for as long as possible. And so this is what this book is about, is actually just giving you strategies for a long-term healthy retirement. And so that's what it's about. And hopefully it's accessible and people will get some real benefit out of it. So yeah, as you said, the book is called Harnessing the 9 Hallmarks of Aging. You can get it on Amazon. And you can dial up my website, which is of the same name, and just Google Greg Macpherson, and you should be able to find me. And I just want to wish you and all your audience a long, healthy life. That's what it's all about, and that's what we can achieve.
Well, thank you. I really consider people like yourself a hero, and the parts of business I'm involved in will also be carrying your book too. And, I want to, I guess, leave one more comment. People sometimes they kind of want to embrace this kind of stuff, but then they sometimes look for reasons not to. And there is no perfect solutions. You and I, we could die tomorrow of a blood clot or of some other disease. That doesn't negate the power of what we're talking about. Simply because one person did not live to be 85 and still do jump ropes doesn't mean this is not valid science and valid good sense. So I always kind of want to leave people with that, because it is the truth. But the majority of people will benefit so significantly. And it is about quality to me more than quantity. Yes, quantity sounds nice, but even if I have less quantity, whatever I have, I want 99.9% of it to be quality. I'm not always my best friend. I work too hard and I don't sleep enough because I tend to be a workaholic, and that's not friendly to me at this age. But the only reason I can do that is because I'm embracing what you and I were talking about. But I want, that's where my work needs to be done, is kind of pulling back so I can take better care of this thing with less work. And I know that. So everybody out there knows what they need to do, and everybody can do the things you're talking about in your book. So I encourage everybody to learn. One of the great places is Harnessing the 9 Hallmarks of Aging by Greg Macpherson. And thank you so much for all your time and your wisdom, my friend. And hopefully we will talk again, I'm sure, down the road.
Thanks very much. It's great to talk with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.